Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again this week. This week I'm going to be talking to you about college athletics, their programs, and then their students themselves. So there's been a lot of controversy surrounding colleges and some of their athletic programs, along with their student athletes. We've even seen how some colleges have attempted to cover up minor offenses committed by students just to keep them on the field. Possibly one of the biggest controversies that we've just recently saw changes to is whether or not student athletes should be paid. So let's start with the students themselves. As we all know, in different settings, obviously, the massive time commitment in college can be, even if you're like myself and have only taken one class at a time. I've never been a full time student, but I have been able to watch my wife struggle through managing her time as a full time student. And that's not even taking into account her part time work on the side. So, college can be a lot for anybody. I think we all realize that. But now let's think about the time it takes just to be a college student, and then add in on top of that being a part of an athletic program. So, granted, students have been doing this for what we may consider successful for a long time, but I really want to talk about what that actually looks like for those students, beyond what we might just see on ESPN or hear on the radio, or from cooler talk at work, or their performance in last night's game. So, according to Jacob Peters of the Business Insider, he reports that students range from putting an average of anywhere to 32 to 42 hours a week in athletic related activities when there's sports in season. And that's on top of being a full time student. The NCAA has eligibility requirements as well for students, like minimum credit enrollment and minimum GPA requirements. So for freshmen, the minimum enrollment is 12 credit hours. Then it drops to 6 credit hours for the next 3 years. And with a minimum yearly requirement of 18 credits per year. But the exception of that is their sophomore year, which they're required to take at least 24 credits for the year. The minimum GPAs required range from 1.8 to 2.0, depending upon their school year. So, looking at how much time it takes on average per credit hour, the University of Michigan says a good rule of thumb is for every 1 credit hour a student is taking, it's generally about 2 hours of study time or work done outside the class. And classroom time is expected to be around 12 credit hours for on campus students, but that's dependent on their class load. So, adding everything up, if the average student athlete conservatively spends around 35 hours a week on athletic activities, and at minimum is taking 6 credit hours and spending an average of 12 hours on classwork outside the classroom, plus 12 hours roundabout in the classroom every week, this leaves them spending about 59 hours a week on school related activities alone. So it's like working 20 hours over what most of us would consider being full time employee of 40 hours a week. So that's a lot to manage for anybody, especially if you're an 18 to 21-year-old kid. So student athletes have also felt a major strain on other things than their time, but also some of their finances. Without having time to pick up a part-time job because they're so busy at school, they haven't been able to pay for things like food and rent and really struggled in that area. But this past September, we finally saw some relief to some of these students where the NCAA finally allowed schools to start offering stipends in addition to some of these kids' scholarships. So Chris Isidori reports for CNN saying that most of these stipends are ranging between $2,000 and $5,000, dependent on the school and what they're doing. So before this change, students weren't allowed to receive any financial benefits from the school outside of their scholarships for things like food and rent, otherwise this would be considered an NCAA violation. And then Chris Isidori said that this left a lot of kids really feeling strained all across America. So I'm going to show you a short audio clip of Arian Foster, and he's speaking in the Epix documentary called School: The Price of College Sports, and he's talking about what happened to him at his time when he was playing in Tennessee from 2005 to 2008 as their running back. So as you saw, Arian Foster, he was in violation of the NCAA rules because he was taking money underneath the table from Tennessee just so he can pay for some of his basic needs. And this was a violation. So this is a huge thing for some of these students to have this financial burden lifted with some of these stipends. They no longer have to sneak around and get money under the table just to pay for a meal. And a little bit later in that Epix documentary, which is a great documentary if you do want to go watch it, Arian Foster talks about some of his teammates that they were selling drugs just to pay for the food and rent as well. That's pretty extreme, I know. So I know all of us don't necessarily watch college sports or follow it, but I think we've all seen how big college sports has really become. So according to US Today, John Solomon, there are 28 schools in America whose athletic departments posted revenues of over $100 million for 2015. That's a lot of money. But do you ever wonder where that money is going to? So USA Today reports that Division I schools are spending up to 6 times more on their athletic programs than they are their academics. And most of that revenue comes from ticket sales, but then closely followed by media agreements as well. Colleges are spending more money than ever on their athletic departments. Some of the top tier schools post revenue thanks to their athletic departments, but not all of them have that. Some actually show losses in their athletics because they're spending so much more money than their school is taking in. But where do these colleges make that difference up in? In an article by the Huffington Post, written by Dr. Philip Eagle, he explains that many colleges have raised the cost of tuition for students and kind of snuck in other fees to help pay for the school's athletic department. So beyond the money, there have also been some other negative effects felt by academics in portion related to their athletic departments at colleges. So as I spoke about earlier, there are academic requirements for some of the athletes, but there are also a lot of students who struggle to barely stay academically eligible to play their sport. So CNN talks about one of the largest academic scandals in U.S. history that we saw in college sports. It took place at UNC and it was happening for about 18 years. Student athletes were taking these so-called fake no-show classes where they were literally just getting credit for not even going to this class. It was just kind of like a phantom grade. And they were doing this to boost their GPAs in order to stay eligible to play their sport. But they were getting into these classes because academic advisors at the colleges who knew students were struggling put them in these classes and allowing those students to stay eligible by just getting good grades for really doing nothing. Now students across America are starting to come out and confess that they're spending too much time on their sports and kind of putting their academics behind playing sports. So an article in the Time magazine reports that student athletes tend to take easier classes than regular students in order to get in. They generally get lower grades than non-student athletes. So this is not only happening in those big Division I schools like that we see every Saturday playing each other, but it's also being seen in Division III and some of the Ivy League schools, most of which don't even offer athletic scholarships. So in conclusion to all this, we're seeing a lot of students and athletes finally getting some relief financially through a lot of stipends being offered through schools now. But there are still some other areas where student athletes are struggling, like I was talking about in their time, and for many of them, their focus really isn't on their academics, but it's on their athletics. And they're just doing enough to stay eligible so they can play each Saturday. So whether you follow college sports or not, hopefully now you can realize some of the dynamics that go into it and what's happening beyond that top 10 reel you might hear about, and what the price some of these students are really paying just to play a sport. Thanks.